Good morning, and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat, a show that provides expert advice on matters related to the financial sector and to share knowledge on key issues surrounding the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you join us on Facebook, smash that like button and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago. We're joined by David Hewick. He is the Senior Director Payments, Digital and Automation at RBC Caribbean. His financial services career has spanned, I want to say more than my lifetime, but it's not. It's not more than my lifetime, but it's 30 years. And across RBC, he has portfolios within business and having worked in insurance technology, global wealth management, retail and commercial banking in Canada, I think the wealth of knowledge he's bringing to this conversation is invaluable, and I hope you stick around. He's also married with 2 kids and is based in Canada, and we're going to find out a little bit about his handicap. So we'll see how his golfing swing is. Hi, David.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. And hello to everybody.
Awesome. So we're gonna go straight into it because when we open our eyes, inhale and exhale, there's this thing that we all have to live with. This is money, right? And during the course of the last 2 years within this space of having to survive with this new normal, with your depth of knowledge, what is the biggest change you've seen within those 2 years?
I think that the change in the last 2 years has, in some senses, been dramatic because everybody's lived it, no matter where you are in the world. We've learned to live in this world where you spend much more time isolated and looking at screens and much less time in person. For banking, we felt that it's been cases where we've been limited in our ability to have our staff in all of our branches in face-to-face. But thankfully, we have our digital capability, we have our telephone banking capability. And what we've learned is those things, though they've always been there, became much more important for our customers to rely on. Knowing that even though you might not be able to leave your home today, you can still get most of your financial services met, that you can still pay for things, even if you're paying for online food delivery. I think people in the last 2 years have really lived with how important those extra capabilities are. I think banking has been changing continuously for many, many decades. Some of us out there can remember when ATMs were a new thing. The idea that a machine could replace a teller. And telephones became a way to interact with your financial institution. And in the more recent years, online and mobile technology has come into play. And in the last 2 years, we learned just how important it was that customers still had access to their financial services, even when they didn't have physical access to our locations.
It's funny that you mentioned the ATM because I think it's so important, and there's parallels to this and with technology, because I remember reading somewhere it was about digital transformation. When the ATM was first introduced, there was this mass protest because they said a lot of people are going to lose jobs. It's going to shift the conversation. Actually, it was Freakonomics that I read. And what happened is this evolution of what the actual person in the bank was going to do. So from where we are sitting here now, where we are accustomed to the ATM, it seems so normal. Obviously, the change brought this wave of protest. Are you seeing something similar with the transference to online banking?
I think only to a small extent. And in the beginning, I think there was certainly customers had concerns, they had questions that we needed to address in terms of ensuring them that they using a phone, for example, was safe. It is actually easier. It's empowering. If you're somebody who has difficulty traveling or needs help getting to the branch, the fact that if you have virtually any device, you can log on and get much of the same banking done without leaving your home. That actually became quite empowering. But it mattered that customers understood how it worked, that they realized that it was safe, and that they were getting some good value out of it. So I would say over the years, each of the new innovations that has come to financial services is sort of building on the experience of the past. And it's a great point about ATMs is, despite all of the evolution we're doing to make things easier and faster, we continue to grow as an organization. So we're not shrinking to greatness in terms of our staff by any means.
Shrink into greatness. I'm going to use that in a future conversation somewhere. Uh, so let's step all the way back, because we're talking about the overview of what's been happening over the last 2 years, as well as the changes that the bank is making to be part of the consumer now and their behavior. But when it comes to data, we usually associate it with the tech company. What does data mean in the banking space?
Sure. I think that the reference to tech companies is great because I'll refer to a fairly famous quote that Bill Gates made, I think in 1994. He famously said, "Banking is necessary, banks are not." He meant that in the context of because of mobile phones. And what does that really mean? And we're seeing that now. Is there are a number of financial services, particularly around payments, that are part of the digital economy, that are driven by those players, by the PayPals, by Google, by Amazon, by Shopify, by the fintechs, that are actually making use of the fact that this digital economy affords business opportunities, but all of it requires the ability to transact financially somehow. And so when we say we're doing something online, we're not physically sending cash. We're sending information about the money we have. And so we're in a world where banking has always been largely about information and data. And in a digital economy, that's just becoming much more true. But the number of players in the ecosystem that we have to interact with is getting bigger.
I really need you to expand on what you just said there, because I think this is so important. This idea of, you physically have money in your phone, but what you just said is sending info about money you have. So for those who aren't familiar with online banking, who may be afraid of it, maybe you can give us, in a layman terms, what does that actually mean for someone who has their savings, who feel very passionate about seeing their physical money, for them to be more sort of, aware of what the bank is doing.
Sure. Yeah. When we talk about online banking and mobile banking, the reality is what we have is we have in our systems, we have data that describes our customers and their accounts, and that includes what is the value of the money in their account, what are the transactions they've executed. When we deliver a mobile banking app to you, we're not putting all that information on the phone. The phone is simply a window to see what is in your bank account at the bank. So we go to great lengths to protect that information and to make sure that the data that we have about your financial services, your accounts, your balances, your transactions, is safely inside the bank, and the phone is just a window to look at it.
Awesome. And back to what I read, because I love to understand certain industries. There was this article about the amount of physical buildings, bank buildings in the Caribbean in comparison to other parts of the world, and like in terms of space, we have a ridiculous number of banks in Trinidad and Tobago, when a lot of folks are already transitioning online. Do you have any insight as to why that may be?
Why we had so many in the beginning? I would
Yes.
say, yeah, there's very much, and this is not unique to the Caribbean, by the way. I think everywhere in the world, financial services has gone through a similar transition to a time when everything you needed to do needed to be face-to-face, to increasingly an ability to do those same things without being face-to-face, whether it was visiting an ATM, whether it was picking up the phone. If I wanted to make a purchase, I used to go to the bank, get cash for the day, and then use that cash to interact with my merchants. And that very much still happens, but you're increasingly also saying, I don't need to go carry a bunch of cash around. If I have a card in my hand, I can use that card to make the payment. And so that as all of those things have changed over the years, you're realizing that for customers, it's more convenient. It's safer to do things that way. It's way easier to carry a piece of plastic that's secure and has a PIN than it is to carry a big envelope full of cash. But as all that activity for our customers moves to these different ways of interacting, then you don't need nearly as much physical infrastructure spread across the country. We still very much have buildings and head office and places, and we still have people. Those people are doing different things, and many times the work they're doing doesn't need to be directly in front of the customer.
And for that customer who is like, I don't trust you banks, I prefer to put my money under the bed, what say you to that customer, David?
Trust is always an issue. I would say, if you have your money under the bed and you're happy that your money isn't doing anything for you, it's not earning interest, it's not being used to support a richer financial life, then great. If there's a natural disaster, the money under your bed is gone, and no one is going to make you whole on that. If your money's in a bank, it's safe. We go to great lengths to protect it, and the regulators, the government puts a lot of oversight on us to make sure that we're protecting our customers' financial well-being.
Okay. I know a few of those people. If you're watching this, you heard it from the expert. When we are in that process of signing up for banking, because a lot of us would have an existing bank account, and then we say, okay, cool, I definitely need to do this online banking because I'm not comfortable going out anymore. I want to be able to do payments online. But then the bank again asks you for more information. I'm here representing all of us. Why, David? Why?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. And the information that we collect, the two primary reasons are, there's some information we simply need in order to provide the service to you, and there's some information that we're required to collect. Financial services in general, and banks in particular, are quite heavily regulated, and there's a number of things that we are required by law to collect from you. If you already have an account and you're signing up for digital, generally the things that we're asking you take the form of, I need to make sure that I understand that you are who you say you are. We want to make sure that you're protected, that if you're signing up for digital banking, it's really you. This really is legit. We don't want to be giving other people access to your bank accounts because they pretended to be you. So very often we have to ask a bunch of questions to verify who you are, not because we're collecting that data. We're just trying to ensure that we know who we're talking to. And then at a minimum, we need to know things like how you want to identify yourself, your username, and if you're choosing a password and you're choosing security questions, that we're collecting that so that when you log on, you're able to verify yourself electronically.
I definitely want to have that password conversation, because I've had some very interesting conversations where people, put their birthday, their child's first name. So I want to talk a little bit more about data and privacy, but we'll come back to that right after the break. welcome back to Straight Off the Bat. Thank you so much for joining us today. On Straight Off the Bat, we share advice on matters relating to finance, which affects all of us, and we share knowledge on key issues surrounding the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. If you join us from LinkedIn, you can follow us, and don't forget to subscribe to continue seeing content and help you manage your money. And I don't know who doesn't need help managing their money. Everybody does, regardless of if you're Bill Gates or Elon Musk. That's a Twitter conversation. So today we're discussing the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago with David Hewick. So David is actually in Ontario right now, so we're going to bring him in, and his decades long of experience. We're trying to squeeze as much information as possible from him today. And if you had missed our earlier conversation, we're talking about data, we're talking about why the banks ask for everything, including the blood type, because it feels like that sometimes. But it's all for your protection. And we just before the break, we were talking about making sure you're using the right passwords and things like that. So, David, do you have any suggestions for first-time online banking users as to how they should approach passwords?
Yeah, passwords is a great area. It's one of those things where I do see a future where passwords eventually go away. But for many years, they're the best thing we've got. And it comes down to what are the ways that when you want to use your digital banking services online or on your device, that we can preset some secret that we share, that when you tell us that when you enter it, we can be certain that it's actually you. And that you have the confidence that only you can use this banking service. And for most of the time, that there are many ways that we guarantee that security. Password is one of them. Many banks also have second-factor authentication with a token that generates a little number, or with personal verification questions, which are more questions. All of these are in the spirit of making sure that we're confident that we know that it's you talking to us, and that you're confident that you know that nobody else except you can actually access the device. Passwords, unfortunately, put some requirement on customers too, and we give as much advice and guidance as we can about your passwords, but generally the simple answer is you want to choose something that's easy to remember and hard to guess. And there's lots of simple ways to do that, but there are lots of ways that seem easy that for the bad guys are really easy to guess. So birthdays, names of family members, simple words. Unfortunately, those are pretty easy to guess, and they're pretty easy to compromise someone. So we generally provide advice to make sure that your password is complicated, and that's why often you'll get from different institutions different rules about what your password can be: upper and lower case, and a letter and a symbol, and no spaces, and this at least this long and not that long. Those rules are really sometimes hard to make sense of, but it's all designed to make sure that our customers have passwords that are hard for the bad guys to guess.
Yeah, for me, I use actually dreams and aspirations that I tell nobody of. And it's usually a sentence with some numbers and symbols in. So I don't know, guys, you could try it. So when it comes to this information, because for some folks it may seem overwhelming, especially in a specific age group. I know someone, my former landlord, he actually used to write his passwords in his book. And from someone who's like, okay, I have to remember all those things, and the bank is saying, okay, don't write it down. How else are we supposed to remember it?
Yeah, it's a conundrum. I am, there are a number of things with the technology today where on both Google phones and iPhones, for example, your password can be remembered by the system and it's protected on your device. I'll confess I use some of those because it's easier. But I would caution that the security of that capability is only as good as how well you protect the device in your phone yourself. So if you have your password saved on your phone and your phone doesn't have a password, then you're not protecting it at all. So there does need to be some education, some ability in terms of when you're using digital banking, that you need to be able to look out for your information. And not because your information will be specifically used to compromise your access to that particular financial institution, but in general, you want to protect your information online from all kinds of different scams that could be out there. And the principles of protecting your information, protecting your device, having those passwords ideally not written down, or if you are writing them down, they're written down in a safe place. Those things are just good sort of digital health practices for anything that you do online to protect your information.
And for someone who's saying, "Oh gosh, I have to do all of this," what's the point? I could just go into the bank instead. What would you say to them?
I'd say you can, but to put it in Trini terms, would you rather spend your day traveling to the branch, waiting in line, or would you rather have your transaction done in a matter of minutes and then spend your time with your family or liming at your favorite place? That's the trade-off. It's convenience above everything else.
Well done. I had to teach my aunt last week what liming meant, so I appreciate the use of the word. Yes, you heard
Thanks.
it here first, guys.
Well, I am based in Ontario, and I have spent a fair bit of time in Trinidad. Not of late, thanks to the pandemic, and I can't wait to get back because I just can't get doubles here.
Well, and I mean, you had to come with that sunblock when last you get that sun hit in your face, you know?
Indeed.
All right. So, there are different types of people in terms of their stages with banking because you have, Granny who types in HTTPS and is typing out everything. You have somebody who, like me, who I just basically want everything on my phone. Um, and then you have the newbie who has just gotten their first job, gonna get their salary sent directly to their bank. What is the bank doing to make sure you're speaking to those three individuals?
Well, we have, and certainly for RBC, but I think all of the banks in the region have an equal view on this. That what's important for us is that we are reaching customers in their lives where they are. We use the phrase often, being on our customer's journey. So the idea that you have to interact with us in specific ways. There are things that we know that the face-to-face relationship is important. The advice and the conversation that our staff can provide is an important part of the conversation. And so we're available for all of those things. But when you talk about sort of the view for the customer, is like, well, it depends what you're doing in the day. Not every interaction you have is exactly the same. Some things I don't want to spend any time thinking about. I just want it to happen. I don't want to spend time worrying about where my paycheck is and can I get it cash and is it deposited. If I know that it just comes from my employer directly into my bank account on a regular basis and I don't have to think about it, I find that much more liberating and one less thing for me to worry about. On the other hand, I may have another conversation where I simply don't know the answer and I would like to talk to somebody, and it might be on the phone or it might be in person. It might be in person at a branch, or it might be in person with a banker who's able to travel. And the banks want to be able to reach our customers in all of those ways so that we can be providing the best advice and the best service based on what the customer needs to do, and not assuming that every customer needs to do everything exactly the same way.
And let's talk about the bottom line, which is the economic impact. What are some of the changes or the shifts of somebody who has to do, walk into the bank to do certain things versus online? Like, what's like the three key elements of that customer?
Well, I think for us, there's sort of value for service. What are the things that because it costs different amounts of money to perform different things, and so you'll see that reflected in banks in terms of their fees. And in many cases, what we're offering is not only is there the convenience of doing things in a self-serve way at an ATM, at the point of sale, or online, but we're trying to make that so that that's not just easier and faster, but it's actually cheaper as well. And in some cases, there's things that we look at economically and go, we need to do this in the most effective way, because that's how we do our best to keep fees and prices down for your customers.
Right. And what about us as individuals? Because sometimes, we know that certain things aren't good for us, like fast food. But yet we still go and do it. Steve Jobs famously said, customers don't know what they want. So sometimes we have to actually show individuals what is the economic impact to you when you actually do this, because it's technically a hurdle, right? You're not accustomed to this idea of signing in and seeing your money on your screen. So that in itself is going to be a huge hurdle to adjust to. So what say you to that customer?
I would say what we're seeing is more and more customers every day are already convinced, and they'll already come to us. And what they're asking us is, I want to do even more online. When are you going to give me even more capabilities so that I never have to come to the branch? There are customers who need to do both, and we recognize there are some customers who just aren't there yet, some who may never get there. And that is why we continue to have kind of all of those channels of access available for our customers. The conversation really comes down to access and convenience. What is easiest for you to access? What is most convenient for you to access? And for you, what is the least expensive way to get things done? And sometimes you got to factor in the fact that your time is worth money to you. The effort to travel, the effort to park, the effort to get around, that actually has a cost too. So imagine that you're paying yourself whatever hourly rate you think you're worth, and then calculate how much it costs you to travel to do your banking. If that same thing can be done in a few minutes, and for you economically is, what are you paying yourself to do? What are you spending your time on?
Yes, the adage, time is money. And you mentioned someone asking you what new stuff you have. Is there any like exclusive insight you can give us that, some maybe a feature is coming that we don't know about?
I can't speak to all of the banks. And I can't even share too much with respect to what RBC is doing, but I can tell you that all of the banks in TT are looking very hard at what they've got and what their capabilities are, and they're all working hard to bring great new things to you in the near future. And I would say, I can say on behalf of RBC, we are no exception. There's a lot of exciting stuff that we're working on that isn't quite ready yet. That we'll be really excited to share in the near future.
Gosh, that was a politically correct answer. Guys, I really tried to squeeze stuff out of him, but he's shut tight. So maybe next time. So what we want to do is have a conversation about one of the most popular, things that are trending now: cybersecurity, fraud, things that get us all afraid. And we have this image in our heads where someone's in a hoodie on their keyboard, typing away, trying to get into our money. So no pressure to David, but he's going to explain everything to us right after the break. welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today on Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers so much information, more specifically about your financial status, because we want to be able to share knowledge on key issues surrounding economic development in Trinidad and Tobago. If you're joining us from YouTube, smash that subscribe button and continue seeing content to help you manage your money, because we all need this. Today, we're discussing the role of data and digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago with David Hewick, and he's joining us from Ontario, which is in Canada, which I think is cold now. Is it cold today, David?
We are finally getting to the spring and summer seasons in Canada, so I'm looking forward to hot for us, which would be in the mid-20s. That's cold for TT, I know, but it's warm enough for Canadians to wear a t-shirt and sit outside and relax.
Depends on the Canadian, because sometimes I see you all in flip-flops and I'm like, what? Why? All right. So, as someone who has a wealth of knowledge over 30 years in this space, as well as, working with RBC Caribbean, what can you tell us about this cybersecurity space? Because when we have our information online, then we're open to this world wide web of people trying to not just get our information, but who else we may be discussing, because we've had guests in the past, actually from RBC Caribbean as well, that spoke to us about social engineering. So I don't know if where exactly you want to touch that as it relates to data and digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great conversation, and it's a hard one because there's so many ways that the bad guys out in the world have so many sophisticated ways of getting information about you. And what the banks do is we put a lot of energy into what we can control. We can control the way our systems are built. We can control the ways that we enable access to our systems. We spend a lot of time monitoring the world in terms of what the threats are and what's happening in terms of cybercrime. And for some of the banks, RBC included, where we have a large global parent, we get advantage to having good insight to that stuff. So we go to great lengths to protect our infrastructure, to protect, to build our capabilities, our apps and our online in ways that make them very, very secure. Those are things we can control. What we can't control is what others outside the bank are doing and how our customers are working on. So we want to do as much as we can to educate our customers on how they can protect themselves. And social engineering is a great example. People, the social engineering things that happen can be very sophisticated, that somebody will pose in convincing ways to be other than who they say they are. Maybe a bank, maybe not, maybe something else, maybe a service person, and they're having a quick call just to verify some piece of information. I just want to confirm that you live here, or that your address is this, or for our records, could you tell us this? You should be suspicious of those kinds of calls, whether it's an SMS or a phone call or an email that's asking you information about yourself. If you don't already know who you're talking to and why they're asking you, you should be suspicious. Because what the bad guys do is use all of these different ways to get little bits of information about you. And then they bring all those little bits together and create a good convincing picture of you that they will then use to go and attempt to defraud you, or attempt to go to, say, a financial institution and use that information to convince the financial institution that they're actually you. And that's when the social engineering kind of gets around all the system. Is if I know everything about you and I can convince a bank that I'm actually you and get access to your accounts, then that's a problem. So it starts with being good and being educated about how those things come about, and being naturally suspicious of anybody that's trying to get stuff from you in terms of personal information, so that you can protect yourself. Your identity gets stolen. It can manifest in lots of ways. Not just your banking gets compromised, but you find people buying stuff using your credit card online that isn't you. You find people going out and doing other things. And at the end of the day, it's your information, and you need to protect it about yourself.
And even, for somebody who has spent all their time online and make a living online, even I get, a little fool sometimes, because you'd see the email, you'd see the name, but you wouldn't see the email. So you don't see the actual URL that's being attached to it, and you open it and you're like, oh, shoot. So all those things, because we're also under this pretense of multitasking for productivity. But it's part of the responsibility is on us as well. And we did speak about that with Antonio Ventor. So we'll put that comment in the link section comments. I don't know where exactly it is. We'll put that because we have a video extensively on things that we can do as users of the internet. But from the banking perspective, what is the bank doing? Obviously speaking about RBC, to mitigate these things, because we as users are afraid. And, I have the statistics. We tend to click on bad news much quicker than good news. So we have this perception that, everybody's out to get us. And if I go online, that there's nothing there to actually help me out. But in reality, there's certain things that are being placed by the bank to prevent that. So can you give us a little insight on what that looks like?
Sure. Well, there are some things that you see, some things that you are annoyed is, why is it so difficult to log on? Why can't it just be simpler? Well, that's one of the things we're doing, is to make sure that we're going out of our way. And unfortunately, it's a tough thing to make it more secure and more convenient at the same time. Technology is helping us get there. But there are also a whole bunch of things that happen behind the scenes that you won't see as a customer, that the banks are doing, and that they invest quite heavily in protecting themselves. And it's regular reviewing their own systems. The banks generally also will hire external companies to test and to attack their system, to find vulnerabilities that they haven't found themselves. And then we also, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about some of the data that we collect. We don't generally collect data for anything that we don't need it for, but the data that we have about your transactions and your behavior helps us understand if something doesn't look right. And so we're also, in many cases, behind the scenes, proactively trying to understand that a transaction that is coming to us is legitimate. And if we think it's not you, we might look into it. We might map it to an understanding that there are bad guys who are doing this kind of activity, and we see transactions starting to come to us that feel like it might be the activity. That's something that we'll, behind the scenes, investigate and look into, so that we can proactively get in front of those threats, stop the bad guys, and protect you without ever knowing something was happening.
And what about, things that we can do? So for instance, you may have a credit card, and every time there's an actual feature to get an email every time a transaction is created. I was I think I was somewhere having lunch, and there was a transaction at $6, and my friend was like, why would you even swipe for $6? I'm like, well, I need to see where my money is going as well. So it's twofold for me. So a lot of times we may think that this idea of signing up for something new again is too much, the two authentication factor mode. Why do I have to do this? So maybe give us, a holding hand session as to when the banks are introducing these features, why we should actually acknowledge it and access them.
Yeah, your $6 credit card is a payment, is a great example, because we know that one of the things the bad guys do is, if they've gotten a credit card information, before they go out and try and steal a bunch of money, they want to know that the credit card's good. And one easy way to do that is to do a small transaction that they're certain will be approved. If they see that transaction and it's approved, they can say, well, this card number that I got through nefarious means, I now know this is a good credit card, and you can use it to go get some money. If that $6 payment got turned down or denied, then they'll say, well, let's not use this card. We can't sell this data to another bad guy. For you, being able to see those things happen, if something looks out of whack, even small, is our attempt to give you the best information about what's going on with your credit card so that you can assess whether or not this looks right. And if it doesn't look right, that you can contact your bank and say, I'm seeing transactions that don't look like me. I need to get on that. And when you get in front of it that way, you're much more able to protect yourself from another fraudulent transaction. And that's true for credit cards. That's true for your regular banking as well.
Yeah, and what about debit cards? I mean, we've been speaking about credit cards, and I feel, people feel a little bit freer about that, but not everybody has a credit card. And I know we recently had the option to add Visa to some of the debit cards. So, what are the features within the debit cards? Because, you feel more sort of guarded because that's your cash, right?
Yeah, it is. And it, behind the scenes, many of the same things that we're doing to protect that information. But with debit cards, we're also in TT. All of the banks are at some stage of getting rolled out the new chip and PIN cards. And those are the cards with the little metallic chip on the surface. Those cards actually have the benefit of not only being more convenient, but actually much more secure. There's a little basic little computer chip on the card that protects you. And so there's a case where your debit card, credit cards went chip and PIN earlier, debit cards are getting there. And what we're getting to is a state where your debit card and your credit card, if you have a chip card and the PIN, it's more convenient because you can use it to tap in many cases, but it's actually also more secure. And so the idea that your credit card is somehow more secure than your debit card, very much we're trying to get people to a state where they understand that the same piece of plastic, or the two different pieces of plastic with the same technology, one accesses your credit card account, the other accesses your bank account directly. Both are equally secure.
Well, that's a big takeaway for me because I assume it's like, oh, it's debit card, whatever. But you're saying is basically it's a tool towards access to funds. One is a credit and one isn't, basically.
Correct.
Okay. And we spoke earlier about the cyber attacks and people looking at this trend and conversation with fraud and cybersecurity. Is there anything in particular that you've seen within the last 2 years that kind of, became more apparent or showed up from nowhere that we should be aware of as customers?
I think I would say that probably the most significant thing is the same kinds of attacks, but just way more sophisticated. It used to be if you got an email that was phishing, an email pretending to be something else in order to get you to click on a link or to provide some information, they used to be pretty easy to spot because they would not feel right. Or there would be obvious spelling or grammar errors in there that this doesn't sound like it came from a bank or from a reputable company. What you're seeing now is it's getting much more sophisticated. They're much more convincing. They're using more clever ways to get your attention, to get you to read it. And there's, if you like, much more production value in it, more sophisticated graphics. They'll copy a reputable company to the pixel so that when you look at it, you really can't tell the difference. When you look at the email, to your point earlier, it looks legitimate, but that's because you can't see the long string of letters off the edge of the screen. So it's something yourbank.com something else / a bunch of letters, and the real address is way at the end, and it takes a lot of work for you to go find it. Those same methods are being applied, but they're being applied in a more sophisticated way than they used to. The bad guys aren't typically they're not targeting you. They're sending millions of emails out because it's free. Very often they'll attack and compromise some unsuspecting website from a charity or a smaller company, and they'll use that website to host all of their fake stuff, so that when you click, even when you get to the site and you go, well, that's not my bank, that's that's my local church group, that doesn't make sense. The bad guys have attacked both of them, and they've built this network up so that to make it harder for you to track down where it's coming from, and to make it harder for you to even realize that it is fake.
Yeah, I relate because, as I mentioned earlier, you're not really thinking about it. I even actually had a company said I won an award, and I was like, "What? Why?" And because my information as well is out there, so they pulled, LinkedIn stuff that I would have seen, and so it was quite easy to. There's also a human element where you want to feel validated. So I'm like, wait a minute, I deserve an award, but is it really an award? You know?
Yes.
So what is it? Maybe we have some like tiny behavior things that we could do to avoid being caught.
This is some of the sophistication that the bad guys use in social engineering. It is the human part. There's things we have a package for you. We just need to click here to acknowledge your package. Wait, I got a present. I want a present. Let me click that. Yes, I want money. Yes, I want recognition. And so that they're getting smarter about playing on your emotions. They're finding the things that they know will get your attention, that they know you even in the back of your head, you go, this doesn't sound right. This seems too good to be true. But what if I really am getting free money? I want that free money. I'm going to click it. And so sometimes it's about fighting your baser instincts and letting your rational mind, if this sounds too good to be true, then almost certainly it is too good to be true.
It's interesting because we also are searching for good news as well, especially during this time. And a lot of us will feel embarrassed to be caught. But, is there any way for the consumer to go and report these things? Because maybe even do it anonymously, because sometimes you just feel maybe, I'm an idiot. I don't want to tell anybody.
No, I think all of the banks, certainly RBC, we have an email address where you can report suspected phishing. We encourage any customer that sees that to take, if it's an email, to forward it to their address. And what the banks do is they take all that stuff and they use it to analyze what's going on, to find ways to prevent it, and sometimes to chase down the bad guys if they get enough information. So virtually every bank does have a mechanism where if you think that you're being defrauded, or somebody's attempting to defraud you, or they're phishing you with a fake email or a fake website from the bank, we actually do want to hear about that, because we'll give that to our cybersecurity teams, and they'll use that information to do their investigations. And in some cases, we're able to shut the bad guy down. In other cases, we see enough of it happening that we can build more education into our customers, and we can build more controls into our systems.
Yes, and to anybody watching this, please don't feel embarrassed. I mean, I've been living online for 10 years and I get caught. So just share the information because it's going to help somebody, right?
I've been caught. I get enough things that every once in a while, just randomly, it seems right. Oh, I am expecting that shipment. I do buy things from Amazon every week. And so this shipment isn't from Amazon. What is that? Maybe it's something I forgot I ordered, and I click on it, and right away I'm like, oh, you fell for it. So nobody is perfect.
Ain't that the truth? So yes, Natalie, this live feed will be available for viewing. When you like Facebook, you will get that notification, and you could check back once we are finished with the conversation. The video will be there forever. Shout out to Carleen because she says you're doing a great job, David, sharing information. So there's definitely value in what we're discussing. I also wanted to mention something that I recently found because I use Firefox, and they have this thing called Firefox Monitor. I don't know. Have you ever heard of it? Have you used it?
Yes. Yeah. A couple of the websites, a couple of the browsers are starting to create those capabilities. Where they already have a list of things we know this website's fraudulent, and if you attempt to browse to it, Chrome has that capability. Occasionally, you'll go to a website and Chrome will say this is not a good website. We don't recommend you go there. And then the capability to, as they give that information to you, also to collect where you know something is wrong and report it in, so they can build that database. So I applaud, in many cases, the big tech companies, the browser makers, are also investing in ways to help you be safe online. So we're happy that it's not just a banking thing. It's every big company that's got technology, in particular the Apples and the Googles and the Microsofts and the Firefoxes of the world, are also doing more to make their browsers more secure, to make your information more secure, and make it easier for you to protect yourself.
Yeah, and we put that link in the comments for those who are watching this, because I used it to, I realized my work email was getting a lot of spam, and the spam that feels genuine. And I realized that, there's certain things that I would have signed up with my email address, and those companies got hacked and got my email address. So why is it important for us as users to understand when these companies get hacked?
Well, I think the example you gave is a perfect one. Is if a company that may not be directly related to, say, your banking, but has some of your information gets hacked, then the very real concern is, I want to know that. I want to know that this company that I shared my credit card information with was hacked. I need to make sure that I'm not, that my information wasn't part of that hack. And it may be credit card, it may be your email address or your phone number, or it may be your address, or it may be other information. Being able to you want to share that stuff, because that's how you interact in a digital economy. I can't get something shipped to me if I don't share my address. But if my address escapes out of that company, and a bad guy uses my address and connects the dots with some other piece of information about me, and they build this profile about me that they can use now to do something more sophisticated to defraud me, I want to know about that. I want to know where I should be worried and where I should pay attention.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us and you're wondering, what does this have to do with digital banking? What say you to that, David?
I say the banks go to great lengths to make their digital banking secure, but you are a partner in that story, and you need to keep your information secure, both for all the parts of your life, but also as that part of the banking conversation. So we genuinely care that our customers have their information safe and secure and are private, not simply because we care about banking, but we want to make sure that our customers aren't becoming the victims of other kinds of fraud, because the financial well-being of all of our customers is important to us.
Yeah, it's really a joint effort, because there's so many different elements that we have to be educated about as consumers, in addition to what the banks are doing, so we're part of the conversation. I want to give you the heavy responsibility of a magic ball. So I want you to think about, what do you see some of the changes happening within the digital banking sector? Sort of a predictive, we won't hold you to it, but it will be on the internet forever. We'll cover that right after the break.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
Can you hear me? Oh, I think I had an internet problem there. So welcome back to Straight Off the Bat. Thank you so much for joining us today. We cover all things financial in terms of what you need to learn about managing your money. If you're joining us from Facebook, make sure to smash that follow button to continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago with David Hewick. He is someone who is very important when it comes to digital banking. In RBC Caribbean, he is in charge of financial services, channels, and digital. So if you'd missed the conversation earlier, not to worry, you can actually watch it when the live is over. You can go back and replay. If you missed it, I did ask David, we want to bring him back in. We want to get a magic 8 ball and find out what he thinks about the evolution of digital banking for the next 5 to 10 years. What say you? What should we be looking out for?
I don't know if my crystal ball is that good for 10 years in the future. But I can tell you I'm excited about many directions that are many things that are going and all heading in certain directions. I would say certainly from a financial services perspective in banking, we are continuing down this path of finding new ways to make access to all of your financial services better and faster, and to make your ability to do payments, to buy things, for that to be faster. And those are things that are happening across the industry, and those are things that are happening at each of those banks. I'm excited to if I use my crystal ball for some of the other things that might be coming that aren't just over the horizon, but as you hear things about big data and AI and all of the machine learning and sort of those fancy technologies, what does that really mean? I'm excited that is going to make us even better at protecting you, at finding and anticipating the things that you want to do, and making it easier and faster for you to do those things without nearly as much hassle. Getting to a point where it isn't an ordeal to log on because you can't remember your password, or you don't have things written down, or you don't have your secret code ready. That I see an evolution where being able to interact online and through your phone with any number of industries, including banking, that's going to get much easier, much safer, and the number of things you're going to be able to do is going to get even greater.
And do you think, because I mean, we are living a world now where we use our face to open the phones, our finger to, verify certain things. Do you see that being included in the banking space?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's in many jurisdictions around the world, that's already true, and even those are getting more sophisticated. It's not just your face or just your fingerprint. It might be, if I'm pretty confident that's your fingerprint, and simultaneously pretty confident that that's your face, and I know it's on your phone, then I'm very certain it's you. And if I can get to a state where I can do that with very good confidence, then do I really need a password from you? It's more important that I know who you are, not that I know that you remember your password. And I see the technology getting to a state where that will become increasingly possible.
All right, this is the last futuristic question before we end this session. We have this Terminator view on technology, and Matrix is like, this is a thing. And people tend to deny the influence of Hollywood, because there's this belief that that's where we're going. And I think, I have some theories on the AI and things like that, but to put it in the context of not actually using it as a reason not to adopt to digital banking, what type of conversation would you have with that person?
I'd say these technologies, they sound sophisticated and they sound scary, but they're just tools. And it's a great note on Hollywood's influence. I think sometimes people don't realize just how much Hollywood actually influences what the technology becomes. Just anecdotally, the first engineers at Motorola that built the very first flip phone were inspired by watching Star Trek in the 60s. So some things that we see on TV are the reasons they become true. But the scary stuff, is AI going to turn into Skynet and Terminator is going to come and wipe us out? I'm not nearly so pessimistic about that. Like any tool, the tool can be used for good, the tool can be used for bad, but the better tools we have, the more exciting things we can do with them. So I remain optimistic that everything that we're doing is going to make life much better, and as long as we're sensible about how we choose to use those tools, then I think everything will be great.
I think that is the best way to end off this conversation, because ultimately that's what the internet is. That's what the camera is. These are all tools, and we are the ones behind these tools. So thank you so much, David, for joining us today and sharing insight into the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago. Make sure to sign up and be notified for our next live show. Everything we discussed actually is available in the comment section for the links. And be sure to like and follow our page so you don't miss a single live show. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.